Welcome. Oh, you joined me at a bit of a rush trying to get back from an interesting City of Cape Town community engagement session. It was a first for me for this style, and yeah, it was, from my standpoint, positive, possibly a bit chaotic. Um, 5 minutes with the person of your choice. Whether it was Jordan Hill Lewis or Alan Windy or JP Smith or Ricardo Mackenzie, who turns out isn't family of Gayton Mackenzie. But it was interesting nonetheless. I spoke to the shadow minister, I think it is, Ricardo Mackenzie, for sports and culture, and he had a whole entourage with him. So just to touch base and figure out where they are. And, obviously with this whole national thing, with the on Sabahs happening, they are waiting for feedback from the national structures down to the provincial structures because, of what happened earlier this year. So I've left my contact details with them in the hopes that they do make contact. I have said that the issues that I've seen are purely because the communication is bad from City, from the Western Cape government, even down on a ward level. So this was out in Grassy Park, and it was for Grassy Park and surrounds. I was interested to see a couple of faces there that I wouldn't expect, to be honest. So, it was clearly open to everyone, of all demographics. I think for what it is, it's a good platform. I just hope there were more people from the race community that were present and that maybe, opted to speak to someone, or they will wait to speak to someone. I believe it was from 5 till 8. I obviously left early, but I left when a crowd started to form demanding Jordan Hill Lewis's presence, and I don't know if they wanted the Premier's presence, but yeah, I just saw police lines, and I was like, cheers, I'm out of here. So, some good information before we get into this whole Killarney, some MSP. I'm sure some of you are aware, I hope. I wasn't aware. First Thursdays, City of Cape Town, or rather the Western Cape government, inviting the City of Cape Town to tag along for their sort of roadshow. The next one is at 9 Wales Street in Cape Town. Parking is probably going to be hard. I arrived there at 4:30 thinking it was a good move. It was actually the worst move. So you probably need to get there like 3:30, 4 o'clock to get an early number if this is the system that they use. So we just took, registered my details, said this is my issue, or specifically I was looking for this individual, being JP Smith. I wonder if he's listening. And they gave me a number, directed me to a waiting area, and Bob's your uncle. Observing a lot of the usual character flaws and attitudes and issues of people sitting and waiting and people in queues and them already moaning about that. I suppose that's one thing I don't complain about because there are 65 million of us in this country, so I'm pretty sure the government has to deal with a lot of us. Not that that gives them the right to fail on their promises. Don't get me wrong. I have no problem sitting in a queue, sitting all day to wait for an individual. And if I don't get to see that individual and I have to come back the next day, then surely they're going to hear about it. Because it just seems like public servants, all that they do is complain about their workload. And I don't mean someone talking to you about it. I mean them using it as the constant crutch and excuse, you know. So yeah, just before we get into this whole Killarney Samasapus, that was interesting. And I spoke to, unfortunately, JP's representative, a gentleman by the name of Louis. I'll give you his full name shortly. Got all his details. Louis Casson, or Louis Lasson, or Louis Cason. I have no idea. His handwriting's as bad as mine. But I have his email, his cell number, all his details. He's a representative for safety and security, which is obviously JP's portfolio. And JP will become probably a focus of most of these discussions and events and engagements. Because some of you may know I've been trying to get JP to sit with me for a good couple of years. And I heard what Louis had to say. Obviously, with 5 minutes, I came there and I said, look, I've got a lot of questions, but it's ideally suited for a meeting. And given the queue for the mayor and the queue for the premier, there was no one standing at safety and security, which means there were no street racers standing to complain to Arma Louis. Maybe one or two, but there wasn't a queue at all. And I explained to him my situation. I said, look, I really want to know why. Evening must say, yeah, they turn you around for the license. We need to get to that. But evening, welcome. So, I explained to Louis, I said, I've been engaging with JP over the phone, via WhatsApp, via, the systems that I have access to him for. And we've just been missing each other. Whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, that's besides the point. As a public servant, he's mandated to give me the same platform and time and effort as he does the next. Which brings me to the problem. So obviously, as I got into it with Louis, he started off with, look, we deal with 2 to 3 complaints just for, and he used the term illegal racing every day. So I'll give him that. But what's coming is, I would like to see those reports. I don't need the names, for the sake of Poppy, but I would like someone to compile it for me. And it's not impossible because I've had someone compile all of my 107 calls for the years and it was sent to me. So they can do the same, just, a little bit of the detail and what the matter and the complaints were. Because he was talking about things like, cars crashing into people's homes. And I'm sitting there going, it's a bit subjective because, if it was one guy and he was gesyp, is that a street racer? In terms of the action, is he actually racing in that moment? And if he was drunk. So, arrest him for that. I don't disagree with that. I'm very sure that we wouldn't be crashing into people's homes intentionally. We wouldn't be aiming for someone's front yard or their lounge. I mean, if a component failed, which happened, from what I understand, to someone recently, and as a result, they collided with someone who perhaps shouldn't have been standing where they were standing, but they went on a TV show on DSTV and complained about, street racing. So I heard Louis' argument and his point that, they deal with these complaints and they are mandated. And I'm very happy that he used those words. But I gave him my perspective and I said the reality is we don't have access to the facility when we need it. Never mind when we want it. When we need it, we don't even have access to it. Now, I could delve into the logic, and that's just going to make a lot of people that would probably run with us and take it as their own do that. But it's quite straightforward. We have 24 hours in a day, and it's safe to assume for many years now, Pre-democracy, post-democracy, people work shifts. Evening, Toya. What is a street racer exactly? So, most of the people are working 8 till 5, 7 till 4, 6 till 3, 9 till 6, whatever the case may be. And at a certain point in the day, a collective can come together and enjoy a recreation. That may be 11 p.m. at night, it may be midnight, maybe 1 a.m. But is the track open at that time? No. That is a simple fact. So guys, please share this if you can. It's probably going to get a bit real tonight. The track is not open because the track has an operating time in general for drag racing until 9-10 p.m. in the week. I don't know about Fridays if we can push it to 12, but it clearly varies from province to province, seeing as how Gauteng, operates till midnight. But then again, we don't know the situation. Is Fast 5 Raceway near residential areas? Is it in the middle of nowhere on an empty road on a farm that someone decided to build? Is that what we need out in the middle of Durbanville? Is that what we almost had with the likes of, John Brussels and the Mother City Raceway project that never quite took off? Is that what was working in the heyday of Wingfield? Which technically was bordered by a cemetery, an open veld, and what used to be a hospital, which is now the eeriest residential block that you've ever experienced. So we need to ask all those questions. And we need to say, well, then again, not everyone works 9 till 5. People work shifts. And when they're working their shift, they can't come to the track. It's fine for the track to host us. Let's be clear. Then you've got people that are working, but they're sitting doing nothing because they are in, an emergency service or an essential service situation, like a fireman, doctor, lawyers. And, I can recall a gentleman by the name of Shaim Bell, who's part of this spin organization, who's organizing this Honsabas, watching my live stream on duty. And that was a simple fact. He was working, but sitting and waiting for a call out. It's not like they can get in their vehicles and leave the vicinity and come to the track because they're idle. When they have to report for emergencies, what are they going to say? Oh, we're 50 k's away, we'll be there in an hour, and then there's a tragedy. So a lot of this mindset is, not in the conscience or the conscious of the organization that runs Killarney, WPMC. And there's a whole host of other examples that prove the point as well. And that's why, another reason why you have the street racing. Swallowed air. With a mix of something else. Probably a muggy, excuse me. Let me just grab my karate water. So, to bring back the argument here, Killarney is a masterpiece because they turned me around for no license. That logic I kind of brought up informally with Terry. And it was one of those hard to answer questions. You could see, it was a tough thing to comment on. And I can understand their position to some degree. But once you get your license never expires. I don't know how many times that has to be covered. And we've got people who are motoring journalists working for popular publishing houses like News 24 who've been in the scene that have also made those statements in articles, if I remember correctly. It's the card that expires. So what does that mean to me? Fine, I can go and get another card, sit in a queue, take my eye test, pay them more money, and then get a new card to say that, this is my new card. Now, there's many points to that. Is it because, every 5 years you need to do an eye check? Maybe. Fine. I can understand that. But don't turn me away because, your license is expired. My license isn't expired. Just my damn card's expired. So at the very least, they're going to fine me for that because, of an eye test. Because of an eye test. How ridiculous is that? So, yeah, I don't know what their plans are to work on that, but these kinds of things I would love to discuss with JP. And for him to take it to the powers that be, who, as the city of Cape Town, deal with WPMC. He's obviously the face. His face is everywhere. And his reason, apparently, according to Louis, was that they couldn't get him out of a meeting that he was in. Okay. Great. But if I go on 8th, 7th of November to 9 Whale Street, and you're not there, again, we're going to get into it. Because I'm now waiting for feedback, for a date, for a meeting, to sit down and discuss the groundwork. And make no mistakes, the idea here is to find a way forward. And as I stated to Louis and to Ricardo McKenzie at Sports and Arts and Culture, so Gaten's mirror for the Western Cape government, Killarney is not enough. And I've got a table full of individuals nodding their heads, and some you can see are interested and others are agreeing. And I'm not talking just about motorsport. I'm talking about the initiative that I've been busy with, which has to do with education. And I said, educating all of us, educating the facility operators and owners to make improvements. So yeah, it was, I won't say a waste of time. It was good to be present. It was interesting to see the factions of individuals and groups that came and their matters that they came for, and how our matters are all intertwined. Where we are paying a bar, 2 bar for a car to catch a fast car. But those cars can't even catch GA16s, for example. Or, Honda Docs. These fast cars are actually not needed, in my opinion, because I'd love to see someone demonstrate to me how they utilize the systems they had before the fast cars. I was watching a video yesterday as well. Last night, in fact, after the stream, because I finished so early. Of a car chase in the UK, and I sat there going, these are fast cars, bikes, chasing this car, and they still couldn't catch him. Eventually, he gave up and he pulled into a mall parking, and I'm sure everyone's watched it, and he, like a genius, ran into the mall, and I'm assuming they caught him, but they didn't catch him on the road. So, if you can't catch these guys, who may not in fact even be street racers, as everyone likes to call us, then you've got other problems. Your coordination is bad. Focus on your coordination. Don't focus on wasting our tax-paying money where you could buy 10 cars for 2 million instead of 2 million cars at 2 million a piece, 10 of them being 20 million, and you can have 18 million to spend on other more important things. Like more feet on the ground to tackle gangsterism and drugs and all the other social ills that is being overlooked in favor of us as, easy targets. So I heard Louis, what he said about all those queries on a daily basis, and I'd love to dive deeper into that. So I'm now waiting for him, And I told him, I'm giving you a week. I'm not expecting you to mail me immediately, but expect to hear from me on a date to meet with JP Smith, and preferably the mayor and the premier and every other individual that is in this or vested in this street racing epidemic, as Carte Blanche reported. So, I mean, like Marseille's example, you know, been through how many cars, you clearly have your license, you come to the track to race, to do the right thing, and you get turned away because, oh, you got no license. Sheesh. I don't blame you, Marseille. I don't blame all of you that left and went to go and race wherever you found a spot. And Toya, what is really a street racer? What is the definition of street? It's so open to interpretation, so subjective, how you apply it. So, one of the definitions of a street is a public road. So now we look at it and we say, okay, it's a public road, it's a shared space. That's why we have driver's license, because it's a privilege to drive, fair. But we aren't driving or racing in and amongst other road users, pedestrians, people on bikes, people on motorbikes. Or I would like to think that. Perhaps we aren't racing on an entirely quiet road, and we have cars around us and we let them go, or we hold them up to do our race, or they decide to come between us or pass us on the shoulder. So, who's wrong? We're all wrong. Because yes, we are holding up the road, if you want to look at it that way. But wait, there could be something in front of us. We could have knocked someone. So by you undertaking or cutting between us, you know better. But you get overlooked because you're not a street racer. So either way, we can ask that question and we can try and define it, and we'll get to so many interpretations. But the reality in that phrase, street racer, is that you are not alone. So all these guys alone that have been called street racers, they're driving alone, crashing into walls and houses and poles, rolling their cars. That's most certainly in that moment not a racer, first and foremost, because it's him alone. He's racing his Gran Turismo Ghost or something. So the only thing about him is he's a street doos, because he's driving crap. But we can define that later down the line. Toy also says here your disc gets removed for being lowered. So your car is lowered, or they look for faults like wires or pedal rubbers, seat belts or passenger mirrors, even if your car doesn't come with it. And that's a very good point about the passenger mirrors, because back in the day, some cars didn't. Depended on the spec of the car. Depended on if that car was even considered, because the driver sits on the right, so what does he need a mirror on the left for? Kind of approach. It could be any example. So, it comes down to stakeholder education. That's why I said in the beginning, this project is meant to educate JP's people, the law enforcement agencies, as much as it is to educate us, to educate pedestrians, to educate people on bikes. I've driven through Century City. I'm driving, and you get people just walking into the road. I can knock you if I really want to be a doos, because I didn't give you the right to walk into the road. You don't just walk into the road. You approach the curb, you stand, and you observe if it is safe to cross. No, people just walk because it says here you must yield for someone in the intersection. But it doesn't say walk into the road in front of me. So if you're walking into the road and I'm 50 meters away, traveling at a normal speed, you should most likely get across. If I'm 50 meters away traveling at 3 times the speed, I'm at fault. Fair. But don't just walk in front of me, for instance. So it's about educating pedestrians. It's educating everyone in many different ways on many different levels. It's not just about motorsport. So, Toya's example is exactly, on point. We can cover that point again. What is low? I had this discussion with the roadworthy station, and we've got this project to do an info session. And I will be blunt and transparent. On some level, I have my reservations as well, because I need to know from this party what their agenda is. What is their end game? Is it to use as an example to report back and say, yeah, look, every car that we've checked has failed. And this is why we want to do an annual license roadworthy with renewal, which is something that the industry has been trying to do for years, for 20 years, if not more. Now, I wasn't aware that buses, commercial vehicles, and trucks actually have to do this every year, which takes me on a totally different tangent about why the hell are there so many accidents involving trucks losing control and tires that are poor. So all of that has to be happening within a year. So then I can't call those accidents. That's negligence by the owner or the truck driver or the user or whatever the case may be, if it's clearly mandated that they need to go and check their vehicles every year. So, we've got so many other issues, bigger issues that affect safety and security. And I suppose I'm jumping on JP here because it's part of his portfolio. And I said before, years before, he doesn't seem to understand the importance of his title. He just seems to see the ones that he can either highlight or that he can use to ingratiate himself. Because to stand up in front of a camera day in, day out, and 80% or 70% of the time, your mouth is street racer this, street racer that. Come on, my guy. Are you actually doing other work? So, yeah, I hear you. I hear what you say. I read what you say, rather. And you actually make very valid points. These officers don't know. They don't know themselves what it is they're checking for. So, we've got someone who's interpreting the law their way, which is completely in contradiction to what the law is actually in place or to be enforced as or for. Toya, we've got Toya again. Yeah, I lost how the new traffic cop cars are lower than our 90s cars, but we illegal. Precisely. And it comes back to that point of what is low. If you're going to show me 3 fingers, we're going to get on that avenue again. Come on. All those G7 Rs, G8s, they have to have sport suspension in them. Can't not be. We invited Ghost Squad cars once, and maybe I should. Invited them to come to a dyno day. Put the car on. Where's the harm in that? You say the car's fast. I know back in the day in 07, motorsport, under, care of MTM, Motor Technic, Maya, VW is an agent of theirs, and that's what they load on your car. Or that's what they used to load on your car. Stage 1, Stage 2, whatever the case may be. And there was an article that circulated within motorsport about 206 kilowatt upgrade for the Golf 5 then. Now that could have been a turbocharger upgrade, could have been a KO3S as we call it, could have been a KO4, could have just been a different software tune and some hardware changes, but it saw a Golf 5 GTI at 206 kilometers an hour. And the report literally just warned the user not to wrap the car around the tree. That's how raucous it was. So here you've got a dealer offering this, whether it's to select clientele, whether it's to the public, whatever, it's being offered. Now that could have also been applied to the first batch of Ghost Squad cars, in attempts to, and flying squad cars, in attempts to catch us back then. But they've had to have had other systems of coordination. So, where do we draw the distinction? Who gets to do it? Our own public servants who we vote into power can do what they want, but we are oppressed. We have to just sit in line and wait for when there's an available time slot for us to go and enjoy what it is we want to enjoy. I made a statement tonight and I said, we're not talking about soccer, cricket, rugby, indigenous sports. And I brought up Kenichi. I told the guy, you're talking like Kenichi. And he's like, yeah, things like that. And I said, well, I like Kenichi when I was a kid. But I grew out of it and now I like racing. And I'm sure if you give the people who are playing Kenichi and you give them a race car, you can say goodbye to Kenichi. But hopefully I get engagement with these two Western Cape government departments and City of Cape Town Mako department and find the best way forward. And I say that as objectively as I can with what's coming up this weekend. Dion Sabas. So I'll reserve my comment on that for the end of the event and see where we are in terms of what is clapping there. So yeah, to just dive into it now, Killarney is a massive poes. And I'm saying it with the greatest of love because it was recently declared that it's not a swear word. Who am I to ignore that fact? So, yeah, it sounds vulgar. It's an expletive. It will probably remain expletive in my mind, but it conveys the message so well. But the reality is, wie is Killarney se ma? It's a track. It's an inanimate space. It's not a person. It has a mother. We're angry at the wrong entity and thing. We should be angry at an organization or a person or a group of people. But this is the feeling. And evening guys, if you just joined, please, you are more than welcome to share. I am really not too phased about the whole viral aspect. This is kind of just to get it out of my mind, to put something out there, and hopefully along the way people will come across it and they will listen and we'll see from there. There's no expectation here from my side. But why do people feel this way? I've asked so many people, why do you say Killarney is a masterpiece? And most shrug their shoulders. Some will, because, my buddy said it. Some will actually give me reasons, and I appreciate those who have. Because it gives me context. I know why I said it. And I only just said it now yesterday. Like, formally said it. I've had my issues with WPMC since 2009. And by me being back now and just proving everyone wrong and proving myself right by attempting to engage and getting the exact same BS 16, 17 years later. I know that's going to upset some, and I honestly don't care because it's not affecting me. Whether I go to the track, whether I don't go to the track, whether I'm banned, whether I can take out a membership or I don't take out a membership. It's made no difference in my life. Now, there's a lot of people that feel pressured into going because of the intimidation or the perception of intimidation from the city. And that's what it feels like to me. And I'm not intimidated. I'm seeing it and I'm going, I wonder how someone in that position would feel. And now that is what is bringing them to the track. And there's so many people who are coming to the track for the first time because they don't know what to expect. And there are so many that's competing on Saturday who have said they've never competed at an, and they still see it as an MSA event, but they've never competed on that level. They've spectated maybe at that level. So that's why I'm going to reserve my comment until the end of this event on the 5th of October and see what the general consensus is in the feedback. But given the recent events and the recent few weeks, there's been nothing good to say about these big events. So, yeah, we will see. But I mean, why do people feel this way? What's happened to them? Did they stub their toe? Was the toilet dirty? I know people have told me, they're standing at the start line and they don't enjoy cigarette smoke. But now you've got someone smoking dacha. Now you've got a matter that's now totally outside of motorsport, and now it's an issue of rights. So yeah, it's legal for you to smoke. I don't really know. I don't really care. But your right to do something ends where my right begins. And what that means is you have a right to smoke. Fair. But I also have a right not to inhale that smoke because I would just like clean air, clean water, and food. But that is a need to survive. Smoking dacha, you don't need to survive. And some may argue that because of whatever medical condition. Fair. But be considerate towards the next person. Bottom line. Other examples where you can't go and sit at the stands because everyone is standing at the stands because there's people standing at the fence. So if you're sitting, you're just going to be looking into a bunch of asses. So you have to stand. So the person behind you was sitting nice to stand. So at the end of the day, everyone stands. I mean, that's just me coming up with the logic right now without even thinking about it, but just thinking about the person telling me you can't even sit. You got to stand all day. And if you sit, you're going to miss something because everyone else around you is standing. There's been some improvements that I've seen, obviously having not been at the track for 15, 16 years, is the shaded cover on the grandstands. Some of them, like at turn one, all of the grandstands, in the prime spots, in the center where the track is, and staring at turn one and turn four, the prime turn, and turn three. Those are covered, but the rest of the grandstands, they still exposed and open. So obviously, the club needs money, I suppose, to do those. But the most recent issue, which was one of the meetings, was the racers bringing up that the toilets by the drag section weren't clean, and they had to use the ones in the karting section. Now, if you've been to Killarney, you could possibly get in your car, but you'd have to drive out, go around the outside of the circuit, all the way around to the karting section to go and use the bathroom, and then come all the way back. That's if you are there with a pit car, crew, or a spare vehicle. Because, I mean, why would you want to be driving a car on gravel roads if it's a purpose-built race? Imagine Tola driving the Barraskot all the way around the outside, through the bumps and the dips, to get to the karting section. But they otherwise have to walk if the toilets are dirty. So I'm assuming that is now a non-issue because, like I said, I've seen recently the toilets are nicely painted. There is people janitoring the toilets. Although to the contrary, I also saw other matters and issues when I was there with the spinning practice on the 24th. So there's a lot of reasons for why the people feel the way that they feel. The pits at your bad pits, the new pits is same issue. You're gonna sit, and someone in front of you is gonna be standing at the gate or the fence or whatever that is on the top of the pits, where the spectators can view. So you're not gonna see anything. And many people come with their cam chairs, they're set up, and at the end of the day, they're standing because they can't really see anything. So a lot of people have complained about the viewing areas. And again, if you want to get down to, drags is overlooked, like Wade, I think, said last night. Those pits were made for the circuit. So now you've got this big obstruction in your view, and you can't stand to the right of it because you'll get the start line, you won't get the finish line. You can't stand to the left of it because you're not going to see the start line. You can't all go and stand on the pit balcony because that's going to get crowded. And I mean, so what do? I've seen people obviously enjoying themselves, drinking, losing control, people pissing on that balcony because they're too lazy to walk down the stairs to go to the toilet. So, I can relate to some of the people's arguments. I don't know what all of them are. I've seen and heard some. But yeah, what is the actual issue? I would love to know. Besides why you feel that way, what actually happened for you to say Killarney Samasa? Now, we've got Marseille that said he was turned away. Several others as well. Your card's expired. Yeah, sorry. Now, the logic to me is just, it makes no sense because we're not on a public road. Yes, we may have used the public road and we luckily got through. We didn't get a cop stopping us. We are there. We are there to race. So you could have a driver's license and you could not know what the F it is you are doing and crash your car. Then what's the argument going to be? Oh, but because they had a driver's license, it was an accident. But the person has no idea how to drive. I mean, that's just me coming up with that as I'm speaking. And the logic is sound. So you'd rather turn away people because of that. Or another example I can think of is a guy that regularly races arrived for an event and was told, sorry, we capped. Tough. So, okay, he was a spectator for the night, but he also said, Killarney Samasa puss. I'm not coming back. Well, eventually he is back. But he didn't come for a few events. And it's those kinds of things that I don't think the club realizes or maybe even cares about. So, I mean, the actual issues or what drove these people to feel this way, I'm interested to know and see. I mean, when I was on the committee and I left, it was pretty much about fighting about toilets or timing boards. So back then I could have also probably said, Killarney's massipoes, man. I don't have time for this guy. And I probably said something along those lines. Poof. From 2009 till 2023. Just wasn't interested. For what? I had access to timing equipment. I had access to V-Box equipment. I could go to any track. Now, I mean, that comes to another point that City of Cape Town doesn't understand. What if you just don't want to go to Killarney? You'll rather go to Aldo. So what do you do in between the events that are being set up at Aldo? You're going to force me to go to a venue that I don't want to go to. Never mind this whole Killarney Samasipus. I just don't go to Killarney because I prefer to go to Aldo. I prefer to go to Dalton, or I prefer to go to Midvaal, or Desi, or Iserast Airfield, or Tabanshu, or Northern Cape, or Race on the Street in Kimberley, which, by the way, is also MSA sanctioned. So what makes the Northern Cape different to the Western Cape? Just as a side note, So there's a few things that City is just overlooking. And I mean, when did all this start? It's hard to say. I'd say most recently, from what I can remember, 2007. I mean, before then, I wasn't really involved as a competitor at Killarney. I was mostly a spectator at Killarney. I was racing on the street, catching on all sorts of shit, going to meetups, going to outside events and activations that were not being held at Killarney. Because back then, all Killarney had was the street racing, which is what they called the racing. And obviously the MSA drags, and then the Fast, Furious, and the Glorious, which has now become Street Mania. Um, so, you know, how far back are we talking here when this actually started? I mean, do any of our parents or family members share that sentiment from before 2007, from the 90s? You know, from when they were actually able to go to Killarney. I mean, if you look at the venue, it looks like there were separate toilets for separate demographics to a degree. You know? So that would be something interesting to find out. And then obviously you've got, who is actually the problem here? Obviously it can't be the track, because the track did nothing to no one. Unless you stubbed your toe or you tripped and fell and scraped your entire face on the back straight. But, you can't be holding the track accountable for that. But the who is actually the problem is aimed at people. And where does that issue sit? Does it sit in the admin office on the first floor, on the top floor? Does it sit in the maintenance department because, people couldn't hear the drags because the PA system didn't work and nobody checked it? Whose fault is that? Maintenance? It's operations? Who checks that the wires are functioning? Who checks that the equipment is in order? Do they just check it on the morning of an event? Those questions can be answered and asked, rather, and answered. And where is this coming from? It's what I mean by that is it just someone that's stuck on a narrative because they feel done in by? I spoke to someone this evening who was talking about his life under apartheid, and he didn't get that many years to enjoy his passion. And that could resonate with a lot of people who are still harboring feelings from back then. You were banned so long that you are now of pensionable age and you actually can't handle a car, but you still enjoy racing. But you were banned in your prime. And who decided that ban, presided over that ban? What was their reasoning? All these things appear so biased. I can understand on some level why people say that. I mean, if you look at the poll that I did this morning, it was ridiculous to see. With very little marketing, with no marketing, 6 people. Yes, Killarney's Maasapus. With very little marketing, that jumped to 16. I don't even know what's on now. But I mean, it's pointless sending that around the country. The relevance here is for Cape Town. But I'd be canning myself if I send it around the country and it picks up more people that were here. I actually came to Cape Town and we came there and yeah, we jump on board with this because these were our gripes. And I mean, the reason why I brought this up is because I don't see change. I don't see change that actually adds value of, and relevance to the people that it should matter to, where it can make a difference. I just see people's pockets being aligned. And that's a sad thing to see. Because the majority of these people that, started what they started or do what they do was, for the community. And when I hear that and I hear what I say and I think to myself, you know what, fuck. I know I'm not going to disappoint the community. I know that in my very being, in my bones, in my murg. My only worry is how long is it going to take to realize it. Because, there were kids interviewed in another racing segment on 400 meter that I mentioned yesterday. I would love to see those kids in 10 years' time behind the wheel, racing competitively with their regional colors, their national colors, just as the select few are doing so now. And I would love to dig deep into these current scenarios and say, okay, let's explore this. And these are now public figures. How did they get into this sport? Were they sponsored? Did they have every opportunity to do it? Or were they given an opportunity because they didn't have that? Just for some context. Because I don't see this sport benefiting the people it should be benefiting, and that's been my issue since 2007. Racing out on the street, looking at the scene, seeing the camaraderie and the togetherness, but seeing nothing else but just the social aspect of it. We're testing because we have no access to a facility to test our cars. And, fair, that may come with a price, but the point is we don't have access. I challenge everyone that listens to this to try and figure out if they can spare an hour in the day to go and test the car. It's not just an hour. It's maybe the whole day to go and prepare, get the car out, get it ready. Maybe you take it with you to work, and then 12:30 you leave for your 1 o'clock. You're too late. So now you take a half a day, your appointment's at 2 o'clock, you're going to get an hour on the track. If you get on that track at 2 o'clock and you come off at 3 o'clock, how is that realistic? It's going to be dependent on the person before you and depend on the person after you. So when do we actually have access to do these things? And that's what the street is for. It's not like anyone's going to argue with me the road isn't made to the same specification. It caters to motorsport. Whether you want me to look at the specification or not, City of Cape Town proved that last year with Formula E. Need I say more? No, I don't. So, how do we fix this? And more importantly, should we waste our time fixing it? Do I really give a damn anymore about Killarney? No. And I've engaged a lot with WPMC since last year. But I've just used up my last nerve. You phone to speak to someone, can you please put it in an email? You put it in an email, oh, what do you mean by this? Can you please simplify it? Come on. If anything or nothing, that is just wasting time and delaying an issue. So what do we do now? We go to the next step. And when people bring up Killarney like they did this evening, I turn around and say, well, let me explain to you why I say it's not viable. And once I'm done, they're all going, yeah, you have a point. Obviously, I have a point. Because the logic is evident. If you just sit and think and go, if this venue hosts all these events and sections of this facility is needed for all of those disciplines, then that just means you're going to get less of a chance to have that. It's like you coming to the racetrack and there's 5 of you that want to race one car. You're not going to get a chance to enjoy yourself unless you're the only car there. Then you can have as much rounds as you want. So, how do we fix this? Quite simply, we need a whole lot of new individuals. But the problem is, has there been continuity? Has there been knowledge exchange within that organization over the years? I can guarantee you there hasn't. Not to the point where we can just switch and say, right, you are now doing this, you are now doing this, you are now doing that. Rest of you are taking a break for a month. Let's see how it goes. I can guarantee you that's not possible at this moment in time. So, I mean, we've got an unfortunate situation where, as JP Smith said, we've got 19,000 kilometers of pristine road. And as I said last night, guarantee you a couple of thousand, if not 10 or 12 of that can be used for racing. And I can also guarantee that there will be the kansvatters that will go there outside of us sanctioning and closing sections of the road to go and sneak one in. Because that is not the solution. That is an interim solution because that infrastructure already exists. And I'm talking about 24/7. And this is probably where there's this talk of, a racetrack coming up in the winelands. Whether it's true or not, I could really care less. Whether it's them taking this idea and running with it, that's also fine. At the end of the day, whoever has taken ideas and run with it, it's not entirely what should have been done or the way I would have done it. And that's fine. Because you kind of just done some homework for me as well. So, thank you. But, yeah, I mean, we cannot be getting this right in Gauteng. We cannot be getting it right to do an MSA-sanctioned drag racing event on the street in Kimberley every Easter, where there were street drags in Margate in KZN on the street years ago, where you can go and hire airfields in other provinces. And yes, we've got Saldanha here, but you tell me what the surface is like. Because I remember going with new tires and needing a new set of tires when I was done with 3 runs. So we cannot just be having the issues here because of 2 or 3 reports by people because they feel that the street races are a nuisance and a disturbance, or a street racer drove into their front room or their house. It happens around the world. I mean, so we're going to focus so much on this section of an issue within safety and security that we put all this money and effort into one venue that is incapable of hosting events to our needs. Never mind what we want, to our needs. To then turn around and tell everyone, yeah, if you don't go there, be prepared for the worst. Or we're going to clamp down because you've got a space. I'm sorry. How many baseball fields are there? I know there's one major facility that I know of in Athlone, but how many baseball fields are there? Plenty. So Killarney could be the major facility. Great. But where are the other facilities to support that? To provide for the need and to develop and provide for growth? How many soccer fields are there? How many soccer stadiums are there? How many rugby stadiums are there? How many cricket fields and stadiums are there? And then how many other fields for the different leagues and different levels exist in this city alone? And yes, you know what? Cars are noisy. Great. But why are we being oppressed when we have just as much right as the next South African under our constitution? So where is the accommodation? And yes, I agree there should be compromise. But we're not even engaging. I mean, let's see what Toya has to say here. Where's the seating for the burnouts? Yeah, it's another example. And I got to Killarney, lost my license on my way there. Luckily, my mom found it in the parking so could show a pic But how, if I'm on the system, do they need to see my license? Very valid point, sir. Very valid point. Must say, if you're still watching or listening, I hope you're taking note. If you're on the system, how did you get on the system? Yeah. No. No, true. It's not the city, it is the people. It's the people in the city. And I know I called them arseholes last night and I said they're useless. And unfortunately, that is the case. Not all of them. Not all of them. But a huge majority of them. And I mean, I saw it this evening as well. Of the two helpful people, that was a fraction of the balance who were clearly just there to have a good time. They were working, but they were socializing. Tyd vir gat vat en gat maak en kak praat. That's all I saw. And a handful of people stressing themselves and running around like complete mad chickens to attend to all of these irate individuals standing in a queue and whatever the case may be. In fact, tonight would have been a perfect night for you to race anywhere away from Nando's, because everyone was in Nando's. Everyone was in the Nando's district tonight. Evening, Sergio. Welcome. Yeah, they need to see license, because if license car is expired and they allow you to race and shit happens, then they are held liable. Fair, and that is down to the insurance liability cover that they have, I'm sure. But the reality is, you have an indemnity for a reason. And I know they will bring up that, they've had people threatening to take the legal action even though they've signed an indemnity. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm openly saying the only thing that matters to me is safety, right? And from that stems ability. So who are we, especially when we celebrate 15 and 16 and 7 and 8 and 13 and 14-year-olds who are racing on circuit? So you've got karting drivers or karters that are, 9, 10, 11, 12. The guardians are signing on their behalf. Is it mandatory that the guardian have their driver's license? No, the child may have the MSA license. So then everyone can go and apply for the MSA license and say they've got a racing license. Even though Killarney for drags isn't sanctioned anymore for MSA, if I've got a racing license and I'm at a racetrack, wouldn't it be logical that that would be acceptable? But now then you could also say, Sergio, why didn't you go and renew your license? We don't know the circumstance. It's a fair point. And if that's the requirement, then we're hardly going to get the people that we actually need to reach to come to the track. Because a lot of people that are racing probably don't have their license. A lot of people that have high-powered cars, I know for a fact their cars aren't licensed, nor do they have license. So, I mean, I hear you, Sergio, and it makes sense, and that's the reason. But was that conveyed to, Marseille? I mean, I got told that when I queried it in scrutineering, and everyone was jumping down my throat. I said, hang on, I'm not here for you to jump down my throat. I'm saying this is the reality. People are coming here, they're being turned away, they're going to race wherever they're going to go and race. I'm not going to give away the spots. But they could have just been here and we could have gotten another one on board and to support the track and to say to others, hey, come to the track. One day we could find ourselves racing with Tola or Herman or Sean or yourself. And we can be recognized for that, because going to the street, while it feels good, while it's accessible, while it's, for the saamvis, as I say, for the community, what are you actually going to get out of it unless we take the street and we formalize it and we make it a safer space so that we can actually start recognizing it and turning it into a sport on the street? Because now it's just a recreation. That we've got to face facts when we race on the street. So, I mean, Sergio's saying, I'm missing Toya, sorry. Toya in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had Saldanha Navy Base. Yeah, Langebaan weg. For anyone remembers that. And I'm not going to say much more about that because, I might just get someone else circumventing. But, yeah. And then Sergio says, remember, robot racing is for the licensed street legal event. S2S is indemnity, can use motorsport license to race there as well as MSA, but no. But robot racing is a no-no without a valid driver's license. Yeah, and I mean, street to strip, I'm very sure Lowe's son was 14 and drove his R8 down that straight. I'd have to check my facts. But I mean, street to strip was born out of, I don't know who else had a discussion. I know I had a discussion with Paul to say that we don't need MSA. Doesn't need to be sanctioned because we're not here to run for records. We just want to get a time. We just want to get the guys off the street into space, get them into the racing, and hopefully develop them to get into the MSA space. Because MSA was dying at the time. So I remember saying that we have the liability cover, we don't need the MSA additional cover, and we obviously don't need the licensing. So now you've got to look at what is the difference between robot racing and street to strip. Street to strip was running since 29th of August 2008. When I stopped going in 2009, and when I pulled out of everything, it was still going. But at some point, for some reason, it got expensive. It became 50 Rand, and it was 70 Rand, and then it became something ridiculous. And enter robot racing. Now, I don't know the full story behind that. And to me, when I looked at robot racing, I literally said, this is complete horseshit. But from what I could see, it was an initiative between WPMC and City of Cape Town. Who initiated it, I don't know. Because there was a point where the street racing, even in my opinion, got really ridiculous. And I was like, I couldn't believe it, because in my mind, I was like, holy shit, street to strip kind of gave birth to this. But, is that a city requirement? Everyone must be licensed. The cars must be road legal. What is the agenda there? What is the end game? It was stated by, I think, Zaid Vad, that, and it was conveyed to me via another individual, that the cops know the owners, they know the vehicles, they have the registrations. Where would they get that if they're not watching at the track, on the street, at the drag venues? Where would they get that? You've got to think of that as well as a possibility. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm just saying, you're herding individuals and sending them to the track. So now you've got everyone in one space. On very many levels, that's good because there's your space to race. But the reality is, not everyone is there. Because of shifts, because of circumstance, because of out of town, because of many things. So the very next opportunity is to now wait 2 weeks. What's going to happen in those 2 weeks? We all know what happens. So, I mean, I hear you, Sergio, on every point. Believe in me, I hear you. But the engagement is the most annoying thing, because when was the last drag meeting? May. I discussed this the other night when, I completely aired the laundry with myself and the MSA drag chair Kuven. And I essentially played the voice note that highlighted my gripe and my issues. And from that moment, I am done. I'm done with WPMC and Killarney. I think I've only really done this because a lot of people that weren't around in 2007, 8, and 9 also wanted to know why I don't focus on Killarney. I mean, I hope you've come to see why. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time totally. And not that I'm in support of the MSA, I wanted to find the truth. Because it was just said that the races wanted this. And that's the perception clearly, if that's what Kuven stated. It was said to him that the races wanted this. So on a purely cost level, I can understand, because if something is cheaper, why would you go and buy milk at ShopRite at 20 Rand if you go to Boxer and it's 18 Rand? I mean, I've seen people go to a shop because something is 50 cents cheaper, but they'll spend 20 Rands petrol to get there. So now my point here is, it's so much cheaper for a Killarney drags, but there's no cover. So now what do we do if something happens there? There's no cover. And yes, MSA will probably try and screw you out of that cover. I don't know. I've never been in an accident to need the MSA, thankfully. But there's so many other things that it's costing us to be able to save us in the short term. And I even said, when I read those messages out, in the short term, it is maybe for the best, because our sport was dying. If you look at last year, Cape Town was suffering. PE was still on a high-ish, coming down off that high last year. And we stood in, what was it, Feb of last year? Of March, whichever. There was an event on the same day, and people drove from here to PE to go and race. But it was an MSA event here as well. That was hilarious for me. That you have an event on the same day. They are both sanctioned. Why would you drive 800 k's to race elsewhere? Especially if it's on the same day. That for me was extremely hilarious. But yeah, geez, you guys are giving me a lot to read here, man. I'm old. I'm hungry. I had to rush from this City of Cape Town thing. Jeez, guys. All I've got here is my karate water. Where was I? Yeah, MSA or motorsport license, and parents are liable. It's always about pointing finger of blame for who is responsible. Yep, that is an unfortunate reality. That's why I say, gun isn't being held to our heads. But is it what we want? I mean, I can openly say I am happy dying on the track. But I would be really pissed off if I died on the road being taken out by a bus or a taxi. So, something to discuss. But yeah, I had expired license one day, was refused to race, and that I will accept was my own negligence. Yeah, fair. I just don't. I see it differently, because what I was aiming to do was, like I said, invite everyone and not use force to convey the message. Use education. I mean, I'm not saying people should not have their license, and their license disc should not be renewed, and their car shouldn't be roadworthy. I'm saying that is the problem that we have. So instead of using force to get that across, educate everyone. Because you know what's going to happen with force? People are going to spite themselves. Wie's die mense om vir my te sê ek gaan doen wat ek wil. That's what happens. And at the end of the day, we all suffer, because tomorrow that car loses control and it's labeled an accident, but it's actually negligence, but it's through education. Yeah, and I've painted that scenario before, and I suppose it's something I'm going to have to paint for JP and whoever, if we get this meeting, whoever comes to that meeting, to try and explain to them. But yeah, But to see, is part of the robot racing rules. Must have valid driver's license. Mm, I mean, what of the first time individuals that don't know? There's so many guys racing on Saturday that have been asking in many groups, guys, what do I need? Can I get away with this? And they're hearing from, not from the horse, they're hearing from, the riders, the horse riders, the jockeys. No, you need this. And then that gets spread as misinformation, if you will, or people get misled by saying, no, guys, we need this. Now it's like, oh, I need to spend more money on this. And that's another example of where it's just, whose responsibility is it? Just like I said in the meeting, we're standing here as a club and as competitors, and we're asking the questions about who's responsible for these, explaining these license regulations. The club should be responsible. You an MSA affiliated club, how do you not know how to interpret the rules from the organization you are affiliated to? There's clearly a gap in the communication between MSA or WAMSA and the club. Now, having been in a few discussions and meetings, the comparison between the two cannot be drawn because one is, it's chalk and cheese between them apparently. And I've seen some of the regulations and I shake my head when I look at some of them. And it needs work. Under WAMSA there are no drag regulations. Hopefully they are working on it because Mzansi Motorsport is meant to open, so that'll now be a second region under WAMSA for drags. Currently they are only running club level drags in KZN, and they are using oval regulations. Now, most of these cross and interlink with one another fair, but it would be great if there was specifically drag regulations. And there are other dreams and hopes there, and I don't want to speculate, but I can see where it's going, and I'm quite excited for that because if several more provinces come on board, we can also hold nationals. And it would be a bit of a shame to have to do that. But is MSA really adding value at the moment? It's nowhere to be seen in the Western Cape, or at least at Killarney. P is dead. I haven't taken note of KZN, but it didn't look to be very busy. Drag National Challenge, well, firstly, Championship was downgraded to a challenge, and it's a lot quieter than what it was last year. The MSA affiliation in Johannesburg didn't even last a year at Midval. Beginning of this year, the drag chairman Kuven was elated because they signed Talton. But if you engage with Talton, you'll just hear them complain that every time there's this issue, we must change this, we must do this. That's why they also had their last event cancelled. So, can we say that MSA is involved with robot racing? No, it's just been replaced by the City of Cape Town and their requirements. I can't say for sure, but Street to Strip did not have that. Enter robot racing in conjunction with the City of Cape Town. That's the first point where I saw it, with this whole 1.4 million rand investment. So you can almost speculate, okay, you've now invested money, so now you've decided to maybe pull some strings and say, this is what we want. This is a requirement. And this is needed because if anything happens, from a liability standpoint, then how the heck are you able to allow it under Street to Strip with the mere indemnity form? So there is an agenda here at play, as far as I'm concerned. But I hear you, I read you, Sergio. I read you loud and clear. So, at this point, if we allow illegal, unlicensed drivers at robot racing, which is supposed to be street legal, as they say, yeah, but perhaps you're not understanding my point. What I'm saying is, you welcome everyone, and you educate them, and you give them the opportunity to do right. And if they don't, then you be punitive. And you say, guys, we've now explained to you why. Because it comes down to, like I said, driving on the public road is not a right. It's not your right. It's a privilege. That's why we get a driving license. At the very least, that's a portion of what the driving license is for. It's a privilege to drive on the public road because we share it with other drivers, with other individuals in public transport, because you've got that distinction: private transport, public transport. And then you've got private commercial and just private individual transport. You've got pedestrians, cyclists, bikers, horse and cart users. All of these stakeholders need to be educated. And doing that by force is not going to make a change. It's clear. It hasn't really made much of a change. And yeah, I can agree for the few that don't have their license. There's many circumstances. I mean, I don't want to mention names, but some obviously had their license revoked. Some of them had their license suspended. And we could turn around and say, you know what, unfortunately, that's your responsibility because we're all grown men. Take responsibility for yourself. But at the end of the day, if you're doing wrong the first time and you don't learn from that and you do it again, then you are making a mistake. And that is something that I try and not do because that adds no value in what way soever. So maybe there you can say, we've given you the opportunity. We've said that we're not going to turn you away because we know the implications of that, which they're clearly overlooking because of whatever requirements they have for robot racing. Fine, but you just have groups of people racing. And they're racing on the street. And then, what does your robot racing actually achieve? Nothing. I mean, if I look back at Street to Strip, what has it actually achieved? Nothing. Because there was no formal development. What development has there been in the sport? I've been engaging with people in other provinces and asked the same question, and the answer is just there's no development that I can think of. There's development here and there, one or two faces because of the means. But I mean the real development. That guy that has that 2-liter 8-valve Mark 1. And there are so many of them that I've seen at Street to Strip and robot racing. And it's their daily. It's their everything. It's their bakkie. It's their carpool. It's their to work and around to site. It's their race car. It's their SUV. It's alles. And, we're just going to say, sorry guy, you can't come to this, but come to the Street to Strip. So, yeah. But yeah, you have a point. They are on it on social media because we are smart to post TikToks with registrations, with locations. We overlook it. We post faces. We post drivers with cars. We share our lives. And then we're surprised when we get told, hey, they have a record of all of your things. Yeah, Toya, maybe one day we can race on the Robben Island. Wasn't there going to be a bridge or something across the water from Cape Town to Tableview, Milnerton? But yeah, no, look, Sergio, I hear you. I agree with you on some level. I appreciate the interaction. But how do we make a change if we don't compromise? And I'm not saying just from the one side, And again, it comes back to the whole point of S2S. It was to give people insight. Who was going to pay the thousands to come to an MSA to prepare their car for an MSA event? When all they wanted to do was just see, dip your toe, would I like it? So now the bug bit, there you go. There's the future of drag racing. The bug didn't bite? Nah, it wasn't for me. But at least they knew. And maybe it opened them up to another discipline. Instead of just driving in a straight line, like some people say, they prefer doing a lap around the course. Maybe they got into circuit. Maybe it's like, I don't like this, but maybe I like it if I'm on a bike. That was the point of street to strip. Instead of just the I don't know, maybe. And I'm quite surprised that there are so many that haven't done a Killarney drags. I mean, I'm hesitant to call it MSA drags, but they haven't gone to that level. But I've seen those cars around for the last 4 or 5 years, you know. So that just also proves the point that MSA was possibly out of reach. Or maybe the rules didn't cater to them. Not that there's much difference now because we're using MSA rules for non-MSA events, for which I'm being dragged over the coals for promoting. But yeah, um, yeah, Toya. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe you could go to robot racing and say, "Oh, I got an MSA license," and see what they say. If you get turned away or not, you probably get turned away, I suppose, based on the outright regulations in black and white. Um, but yeah, go and look at the regs. It's on their website. It's interesting to read. You know, you can come with any tire as long as it's not on canvas to street to strip to you. Yeah, and I read you again, Sergio. You know, we allow illegal drives in cars, and that opens up a whole can of worms. But I'm not saying permanently. If you caught my comment earlier, I'm saying invite, be inviting, educate. Hopefully, you change the perception. And if you don't, then by all means, go ahead and apply the law. But we're scaring people away before we even give them the opportunity, and then we end up with this Killarney Samasipus as a point. You see my point? We end up with that because there's no one willing to compromise. I mean, so we could be the bigger entity and bigger individuals and say, well, you come and see, but please, sort your stuff out. And even with the eventing that I'm trying to sort of put together, it's a similar concept to say, you know what, guys, your car's not roadworthy, but it's raceworthy. So here's a list of all the issues with your car. If anything happens, then we've told you this is why you need to sort it out. If it's unsafe, even under race conditions, I'm sorry, please sort at least this out so it's race worthy. Because we obviously can't have incidents on the track. And if there are incidents that are unforeseen, that is out of our control, that's an accident. If it's an incident that we could have avoided, that's negligence. So yeah, would it be negligent to allow someone whose license expired? Not on the grounds of them having an actual license and just their card expiring. And in the off chance that they have an incident, the rigidity there of the liability cover would prompt me to go and say, well, you know what, I'm going to go and get cover elsewhere. You know, we too set in our ways of compliance, which extends far beyond just compromise. Because compromise is a two-way street. If you are just doing all the compromising, then you are a bit too compliant. There's give and take in everything, not give and not just take. So I see your point there. It opens up a whole can of worms, but it's not a permanent thing. It's a case of inviting you in, showing you and saying, guys, this is the right way. Because all we're having now is the wrong way. It's exactly the same thing like, Lieben. And you've probably got a lot of people saying, oh, Killarney's masterpoes because they cuck and I go to Lieben. But there's a distinct difference between Lieben, and I'm mentioning that particular because there's some stupid shit going down there. The only difference between there and the track is public discipline, like I raised the other night. And that's just barricades, fencing, spectators here, because this is where we're racing. You know? And this is the pit area, and this is a safe space for the guys to work on their cars, and spectators aren't allowed. Or if they are, guys, you need to have a pit crew by your vehicles or by your tools or whatever. That's the only difference. Park your cars here if you're a spectator on the field by the school. This is where you're going to walk to get to spectate. And there's the catering area. Here's ablutions, whatever the case may be. That's not in place at Lieben. Now, the ward councillor there in Mitchells Plain, as I've said before, he was keen to put something together. And, you know, they wanted to engage with me via a third party. And I said, look, what is it that you want to achieve? And then let's talk. And it kind of just, fell away by the wayside. And I thought to myself, well, it's a problem because of the cost to get infrastructure there. So we need to look at the problem of that and how we can solve that by getting sponsors on board. But how are we going to do that if we have this circus happening? The policing is taking the wrong approach. And we're alienating people, and we're just creating this endless cycle of the same issue that doesn't change. It doesn't change for the better. It doesn't show any way of moving forward. It's just a constant punitive process where go race on the street, we catch you, we fine you, we take your disc, we lock you up, and some get scared, some are just back the next time, some move to the track and then, they're famous for it. I don't know. But I do know what we are doing is not doing anything for the recreation and the sport. So, yeah, I mean, I get you, Sergio. Things go wrong and you realize family can die because of our mistakes. At the end of the day, there are ways of changing that. I mean, there is one particular location that is perfect. But I've got to consider that people want to stand on top of the cars. And that's why I say the big difference between a track or any track that's sanctioned or even a private space that's maybe more controlled by the organizer and the street is the public discipline. I mean, if you look at, and I don't know, I don't keep bringing this up. I don't hate it, but if I do, then people tell me, are you in favor of this? But look at Mkuze in KZN. Guy crashed at 324 kilometers an hour, we assume, because that was his last speed recorded as he finished the half mile. But there was no one there, just bush and open veld, no barriers, because no one is allowed past the start line, except a select few of us, and I suppose I'm privileged enough to be allowed as well. But because of that, he only broke an arm. Didn't die. He didn't crash into anyone. He didn't paralyze anyone. Car's written off, yes, I assume. Don't think it will be repaired. But what makes that different to crashing on the street? The only difference is we didn't ask the city for authorization to race there. That's my understanding. What else would make the racing illegal? Because as I said, the road is public, we're sharing it. So if we get authorization and we say, look, we're closing this section of road, it is now essentially Kimberley in Easter. So everyone has to drive around this or take another route. This road is closed, we're racing. But we've got an authorization for that. And so now what happens when we crash into someone? Same difference. So now we've got to consider, do we tell everyone you stand at the start line, you don't stand anywhere else? Do we put up concrete barriers? Does it lose its street racing feel? All those things need to be considered. So yeah, one day we can race on Robin. I think I covered that one already, Toya. Robot racing needs drivers because they want to get guys who race streets onto the track. Yeah, that was kind of the point with Street to Strip, and then it kind of became expensive because of whatever reason. whether people thought they were underselling the offering, which is possibly a good reason. We're charging too little for this, so we need to charge more, and that, I'm assuming, forced people back to the street, and that's probably where the street racing got crazy, and that's where robot racing came in. And I can see where the structures make sense. Like I said, I never liked it. To me, it's what's the point of racing on a track when you have the facility to run the tree? Because, and we've proven that. How many times I'm standing at the start line recording this, and someone jumps at light. Sometimes it gets caught, sometimes it doesn't get caught. Sometimes they jump so early that they themselves, reverse and sorry guys. But that's where the tree made sense, and that was also the point of street to strip. To get the jumpers caught, because it was so frustrating racing on the street. You are jumped like you won't believe. No, you lost the race, that person won. But they jumped you like 3 seconds. No one saw it. So, yeah. Street to strip was there for that as well. S2S for the guys who want to progress to MSA or professional drags. When you say professional, I'm going to ask you who's going to pay them. We've got to be very careful about using that term professional, because it doesn't mean you are good or you excel at anything. It just means you are paid. It's a lovely dream to think about, that I would love to see us being paid to race, and not just sponsored, where like Speed and Sound used to do, contribute towards entry, contribute towards fuel, pay them if they raced to a certain level and got within a certain percentage of their personal best, and a bonus maybe if they beat their personal best and got a new PB, but actually paid, because you maybe have this whole setup like Formula One, team principle, we sponsored by baked bunchy beans and washing powder, magic, whatever the case may be, and you can now afford to employ mechanics, apprentices, set up a car, race for regional colors, which is what we were trying to chase, get in national colors, get recognition by SASCOC and Sports and Recreation South Africa, and get buy-in to say, hey, you've got a chance to put this on the world stage. Take it to Santa Pod, take it to Jamaica, take it to Dubai, take it to Australia, to America, to World Cup finals, and race the big boys. How many people with a Mark 1 Golf had that chance? How many people with a Honda's going to have that chance? And I know a handful that would probably get there. But I mean, if you took Sean Zurich's Honda, how far off an international standard is he? And is that down to the facility? Because going up to Tarleton with an NA car, you're going to suffer. But we don't have a Tarleton in the Western Cape. We do have some facilities that can cater to that, but it's another story. But what would he do at a World Cup final? What would he do at Santa Pod? I mean, you see the times that they do at Santa Pod and World Cup finals, you compare the facilities to Tarleton, it's chalk and cheese as well. So there's a lot of things and work that needs to be done, sure, and I don't really like to use the term grassroots. I use it so much tonight that city and government get together. But we have so much work to do, and we are already shooting ourselves in the foot by just turning away people left, right, and center for the sake of an agreement or a liability issue, where there are events that they can come to with no license and say, well, I don't have my license, but my dad, as old as I am, signed an indemnity for me. As an example, if that were possible. So, yeah. Well, I mean, that was one of the arguments in the beginning, that people were angry over S2S. And if I remember correctly, a lot of well-known racers complained about it. It took cars away from MSA. But you've got to look at it and then say, well, what are you doing wrong in MSA? Why the F would someone want to downgrade themselves and race with no prep and no time slips unless they were streetcars that S2S catered to. Then it just proved that we did not have the field for MSA, you know. And, I mean, yeah, Toyo's got a point there, robot racing created if we could have S2S every week on Fridays, but I think, Sergio kind of covered that. But we didn't have the field. I mean, the reality is the recession killed everything. And that started in 2007, and some people only registered it in 2008. And then motorsport took a dip with Ben passing here in the Western Cape, and things were called into question. This is just my understanding being there and experiencing it. And people not registering that we are still in a recession. We never came out of it. So, yeah, people change, they get families, they are now dads and moms, and suddenly racing takes a backseat. Then, to each their own, I suppose. But now it becomes the excuse. Yeah, I gave it up because it got so expensive. You can come and race your car and enjoy it. I mean, look at Duncan Jeftis in Gymkhana. It was super competitive years ago. Now he just wants to enjoy it. It's not costing an insane amount of money. The car's built. I mean, if he wants to be competitive, there's a few things we could do, but that's going to cost. So I just think, people need to be a lot more true to themselves and honest with themselves. Instead of pointing the finger at S2S. S2S was great to give guys the foot in with the hopes of moving up to MSA, but there was no development, as far as I'm concerned, formal development to push for that. And I remember the pushback from the MSA guys, and I mean, I'm just standing in the middle going, okay, MSA is dead. I remember doing so many runs, one event, that I was like, this is a joke. I think there were 8 of us, if not more. I mean, Ikram was there. It was a handful of us, and it was a joke. But MSA didn't die because of street to strip. MSA was already dying. Then already. So, yeah, I mean, Sergio, they did that with certain cars the last time. Then Slicks was allowed in Nine's cars, and it became a why this one allowed and not me. And yeah, look, I think that is more an operational issue with WPMC, with favor, because it's to this day, people are still raising that issue. Yeah, this one gets preferential treatment. And I think that's something I raised in a meeting where I specifically said, sort your shit out. And it's tough because last year the MSA was also dying in a situation where if we don't pass these cars, we're going to have no competitors. Then we might as well cancel the event. So, did we skimp on our own regulations for the sake of having an event? Then you've got other matters as well. Races coming midday when the driver's briefing should have been in the morning. Or we're accommodating them by having a driver's briefing later, but we're racing with no driver's briefing. Or there's no event because we're waiting for the driver's briefing, but the track was supposed to open at 9. All these things that I'm standing and looking at and going, are you kidding me? But what is being done to cater? And that brings me back to simple issues like the license. You're already pushing away your potential customer base on one angle, and then you're pushing them away from another angle. Yes, I don't know. The club needs to come to some decision and think about things logically, but I'm not willing to waste my time any further. There are so many things that are wrong with robot racing. There are so many things that are wrong with street to strip, and there are so many issues in the Killarney drags that is just, all of these issues are the reasons why drags is a problem in this province for us as the community. And you've got a club behind it that just, don't give me 2 issues, give me 1 issue, and please put it in an email. And then you put it in an email and you get questions instead of answers. And eventually someone like me is going to say, for fuck's sake. And unfortunately, I had to use the expletive, but it conveys the gravitas. I've died 9 months, if not more, with this re-engagement with WPMC to try and get a simple answer to a handful of questions. And all we did was expand on matters because, I still don't have answers. I engaged, I was told send the mail, I sent the mail, I got told, can you please come and meet with me? Met, still don't have answers to the questions that was in my mail that led to the query to come and have a meeting. And I'm done. I'm honestly done. Strictly street. That's open for interpretation. But, yeah. What's just saying? One thing I learned when going to the big boy drags is about who has the deepest. Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, if we did handicap racing, I guarantee you can come with a stock standard car and you could probably win if your reaction is on point. If you are consistently running 18 seconds, you dial in the 18. Dial in an 18-1 to be safe. And you almost likely win the race. And you'll probably get a fast guy complaining, yeah, this is unfair. No, racing is about consistency. It's not about the fastest car. It's pointless you can do an 8-9. Bad example, because now someone's going to think I'm targeting them. It's pointless you can do a 7-5. And then every run after that is an 8-1, 8-2, 8-1, 8-2. You can't even get to within 20% of that 7-5. So, racing is about consistency, about ability. And I suppose it's made it easier for these guys in the PlayStation cars, as we call it. You just stand the line and you get into your mode and you don't even need to wait for green because we're only measuring your elapsed time. So you got your time, 9-1. I did a 9-1. I did a whole day 9-1 kwai. But no ability. Put that person in the same car with a manual gearbox, it'll be the most interesting thing you've probably seen in your entire life. And I guarantee you that. So, yeah, I mean, my costs were literally just, 40 liters of F-gas. And most likely plugs afterwards. And if I did a track day, discs and pads. And I didn't aim to be world record breaking. I just aimed to enjoy myself. And it became consistent. So, enter the bracket racing competition, the eliminators. It wasn't really that expensive. But I mean, if you've got a highly specialized, a modified street or a modified race purpose built car that still kind of falls within the roadworthy realm, it's not like you spend 10K on that fare. And I hear you, it's costly. Really, before the end of the event, you would have spent 4K in food, entry, drinks, whatever. Yeah. But I mean, that's where S2S and robot racing caters again, I suppose. Nothing is stopping people from coming to an MSA with a stock standard Renault Kwid. And they could probably have the best time of their life because they may just gain that extra 0.2 off the track at the start line if they deflate their tires by 0.3 bar. They're not going to be winning any awards, but they may just enjoy themselves. So, yeah. Now, look, the change at Killarney, it's not that it won't happen. It's also because, they've been tied down by their own constitution. And yes, there may be some factions that they don't want, to accommodate. And yes, you are right, it doesn't benefit them. And you could almost respect them for how they operate because they're operating with business principles. That it should benefit the club, but it shouldn't only benefit them. That's my problem. Why must you get if we can get all? That's my problem. Oh, we're seeing this event is very popular. We need to take it from you. That's my problem. So, yeah, I don't know. This is going to probably be my last ever. And, put me to the test. Put me to the test. This weekend will be my last ever attending Killarney. I will be objective enough to still promote it for those who want to go. I'm not going to stand in the way here and be funny and finicky about that, because it is a free country. If you want to go, you can go, but I'm not going to endorse it. And who am I? I'm a nobody. But I can't tolerate BS. I can spend my time focusing on things that actually add value, not just to the motorsport community and to the car community, but to the country and the community in general. And I firmly believe that will see a shift in mindset and most likely see an improvement for all of us as well down the line. Like I said, it's not an overnight thing, but it will definitely happen in my lifetime. And I don't want to be going down this, oh, I know this guy who knows this guy who knows the one in government, and on a connection route, because I've seen that backfire. So I'm happy to do it the right way. And if it fails, then I move on. And if anyone wants to protest, I say, I'm sorry, I was there at that date and time. Nothing happened. Here we go. So, that is a scary thing. Most races like the thrill of running from the cops. Like I said last night, that was the answer of a guy that races bikes overseas. When I asked that question, why do we street race? It's liquor to run from the cops. Oh, you out of your mind. And yeah, look, Santapod, break gearbox and shafts. All I see is grip. Grip, puppy. So I'll go like, this track's got good grip. Where's the backup shafts? Where's the backup box? Yeah, look, it could come down to grading. The reason why Killarney is incapable of hosting it. It is quite narrow, so it is a risk. And I've heard from the marshals, and I agree with them, it's a risk to run even a car that isn't running a chute and one that is, because the chute could intertwine. And a lot of people don't register that, and we've seen that happen in last year with Quinton Boylan. And the wind caught the chute, in my opinion. And he told me I thought he hit a drain. He told me he hit a tire that was laying on the field. And he almost lost it. And thankfully he caught it and he settled the car down again. But a lot of people forget that if you're opening the chute, in the direction that you are traveling is the direction you are going to go. In the direction that the chute gets sent is the direction you are going to go. Because that's what it's catching. It's catching that movement of air in that direction. It's not agile, it's not flexible, it's very rigid in its function. So, if you look at an incident with Ramiz from RMZ, where he lost control, he was already going in that direction when he pulled the chute. So that wouldn't have saved him. So yeah, to run two 9-second cars on that track is probably impossible. But there's also another angle to this, where I've seen a lot of guys react poorly when it comes down to the runoff and the braking. They are long past the finish line, and then they're off. You must understand, the weight transfer for some of these guys running at those speeds, they can't just go onto the brakes. So obviously the chute would make a lot of sense, because then you can pull the chute before the finish line. I mean, it's going to come with practice to a point where you pull the chute. It takes a second or two to actually release, open, catch the air. So you don't need to pull it after the finish line. You can pull it before then. And you can stay in it. I mean, I can hear on some of the runs Herman lifting. For whatever reason, for obvious reasons. But you have to get off lift. You're going to have weight transfer, and now you're going to apply brakes. So you allow that weight to settle, and then it shifts again. Whereas if you come straight off onto the brakes, you may lose control. The rear may get light, super light, and lock up, or just float. So in that case, if you look at someone like Royston, fitted a chute for his own safety. I respect that. If that's your choice, then great. And he sees, he's got self-preservation is a term. So he chose to do that. And respect for that. I mean, I'm very sure there's a lot of guys, because there's a lot of slower guys that they react, they still full throttle past the pit exit. So yeah. I mean, yeah, like Sergio, draggy. We don't feel the need for STS because the timing system always emotional. That was also a recent topic of discussion. But I mean, yeah, I personally use drag racer. I've been giving it out to the guys who want to test. It's their choice. Hopefully they do so responsibly. That's all I can ask for. As far as I'm concerned, my car could break the speed limit stock in second gear. So for what do I have 4 more gears for? I mean, I could even advocate to say if we get to a point where there's access to facilities, then why are cars able to do the speeds on the public road? If we want to argue we're sharing the space, then unlock the speeds when we get to a racetrack. It's not impossible. But given our infrastructure, given the cars that most people are driving that are, completely analog, that aren't even running ECU, some of them, how do we police that? I would argue education. Show people the better way. And it comes back to, Lieben. I call it key Lieben. Show people a better way. That they will say, you know what, we're rather going to go here. But you've also got to consider the fact that who can actually afford to get there? And I had someone made the comment yesterday, but Killarney wouldn't want people from poorer communities being brought there in buses. That's a sad reality if that's the case. But we don't know, because has anyone tried it? Is it going to be tried this weekend? I hope. Buses of people from Tafelsig and Ocean View and Lavendale and Menenberg, and not just the colored areas, but all areas where people are vulnerable. Are they going to be bused to Killarney this weekend? And being given the same experience as if they were at a spin pitch? I'd be interested to see that. I mean, I engaged to ask a simple question about possibility of getting guests, and I got such a convoluted response instead of just a simple yes, no, this is our limits. I was like, what's the point? So I will just keep this for when I do it. And then when I do it, everyone's going to say, oh, we could have done that. Yes, you could have done that. If you were for the sport as you say you were. If you were here for the community as you say you were. And that also contributes to tonight's subject. Killarney's a masterpiece, but where's the problem? The track isn't the problem. The people are the problem. And it's not just the organization that's been tasked with or mandated by the city, by the government through the lease agreement to provide the facility to all of us. It's other organizers that come on board, and the word that I want to use instead of organizers, that make promises that can't deliver on those promises. I'm going to be blunt. And we also fall for the joke. But I mean, yeah, you know what, guys? Hopefully, it's given you something to think about. I would love to hear and sort of read your thoughts. You're more than welcome to send me a direct message. You know, my WhatsApp is in the description, 0662198349. Let me know your opinion. You know, why do you say this? All those questions. Why, what, when, who, where, and how about this topic, and let's engage. I mean, hopefully I get to engage with City. Thank you guys for commenting. Marseille, Toya, Sergio. It's been interesting. Interesting things are ahead. I think some of the individuals in the stream have been the pioneers alongside for what is coming from my side. And I'm very confident we'll make a change for the better of all of us. And we'll see. I mean, I'll be observing. Hashtag ek observe my net. Hashtag ek hou van my plat. So I want to see the change that everyone is promising. I never promised mine would be overnight, because I'm not busy with a gou kyk, nou kyk, geld maak story. I'm busy with something that is meant to provide us with real change and add real value. And as I told the Shadow Minister for Sports and Arts and Culture tonight, what skills do soccer players, cricket players, and rugby players really learn other than the skills relevant to that sport that can be used generally compared with motorsport? Yes, it's an expensive sport, but there is so many industries that is dependent on it, so many industries that it depends on. And I don't mean, you know, the car dealers as a whole. I really mean the nuts and bolts of it, the trades, electrical, structural, mechanical, even civil. Those are the opportunities that I can see for all of us, even agricultural. So, yeah, hopefully you'll join me on this journey. It's not going to be an overnight. I am focusing on quality, not quantity. And this is a learning curve. This is something new. This will probably change and evolve over time. And as I said, 1 October came. 1 October's gone. It's going to be very different from now onwards. And judging by the random people that came up to me tonight that I didn't even expect, and it's like, oh, you SK Racing, and we love your, I was quite interested to hear that we love your statements and your statuses, and I was like, really? Because I got no filter. And I have no problem with a relationship being turned sour for the sake of the truth and transparency. So you're more than welcome to come at me, whoever wants to come at me, but you're going to cry. Seriously. Jy kan maar nou lag, maar ek gaan laaste lag. So yeah, you know, if you don't like it, you're more than welcome to leave. But for those who are willing to stick it out, the rewards will be plenty, and the rewards will be for us all. That I can guarantee you. All I need to do is just figure out how and what to do it the best way. So yeah, thank you guys. It looks to me like Sergio, you and probably Toya are here for the whole run, and whoever else is, thank you very much. It's been an interesting evening, especially engaging with City of Cape Town and the Western Cape government, something I didn't expect. So please do come. 7th of November is tipped to be the next first Thursdays, apparently, as it was conveyed to me by the Western Cape government staff. 9 Wales Street in Cape Town is where the next location is. Because I went and I was like, can't this thing be every month? And the lady told me, but it is practically every month. And I was like, well, I didn't know that. So now I can go there again and say, right, JP, I'm here. If I didn't get my, some sort of engagement for a meeting and discussion to try and get to the bottom of all of this. Get to the logic. What's the end game here? What was the point of the intimidation? What are we expected to achieve if all we're doing is nothing from the city side? And I say that because I don't see the communication. I don't see the transparency. But yeah, thank you guys. If you do like, please like. If you do want to subscribe, please subscribe. And I will see you tomorrow night. Tomorrow night may be short because it's Swansabas on Saturday, if you're in Cape Town. If you're not in Cape Town, check out my WhatsApp channel. 5th of October is very busy. In Joburg, I don't know about Eastern Cape, to be fair. But 5th of October is a very busy day around the country. And I will see you again tomorrow night. Have a good evening. Thank you.